jungle here. Actually, we're on the gravel bar now. We come off the, just at the base turnaround of the bowling alley we called. We climbed up the 8 to 10 foot berm, or a large flat area here. I'm following Ian through this maze.
This is almost a road here.
Oh, here you. Pretty open up.
But I think it's just a coincidence.
So Ian, you wanted to show me that something over there?
Oh, we've just got a good bit of a tree trunk up there. Maybe a down stump. It's pretty high up.
Let's go take a look.
Yeah.
It's hard to see from this far away.
Presumption is it's from the 1964 flood, which was just catastrophic for Northern California. 100-year or maybe even 500-year flood in some places. Easily would have covered this area right here.
So we're looking at it right over here.
Could have deposited this. See, we've got that was a massive tree at one time or another.
Let me get a closer look at that. What it looks like, it's wedged in there by those alders. So if we know how old those alders were, we know how old it. How long that's been trapped in there, huh?
I would. Well, there we have some that may actually be growing out of the tree itself. Younger ones,
like nurse log.
Right. These. I'm certainly no expert, but I would wonder if these are old enough. The 64 flood was 47 years ago.
Well,
I wonder what age we're talking about here. If these could be 47 years old.
If you did a bore increment to count the rings, we know exactly how old that tree is, or how many seasonal growth rings it has. But there's like one there, there's one behind you.
I would suspect that in 1964, if they were alive, they probably weren't large enough to stop this tree.
Correct. That's why it's here.
Maybe. I don't know.
It looks like some old rotten stuff there.
Exactly. So there is a mess of stuff here.
So this is something that could be here in 64 that might have some significance with the aerial 71 Renee's aerial shot. So we'll have to make sure we know where these things are. It's a whole jam here. It's like they all got wedged in here. Could have been caused by 64.
64 is going to be responsible for most of what you see on the ground here. And the ground itself, too.
It's true.
It was just a huge event in the memory of anyone who was alive then. Whole coastal and river communities were devastated, or at least isolated, for a long time. And this creek was completely reshaped from all the evidence we found. We even found a highway department aerial photograph of the mouth of the creek. And that was apparently completely redirected by the floodwaters.
Mouth of the creek meaning you're talking about Bluff Creek?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The first sighting would be here. Patterson runs up the gravel bar, crosses the creek right somewhere around here. The creature walks back behind me this way, cuts across there. The big trees are right back in there. And I think they're pretty close to what we see in the film. And then retreats across through this way, terminating at what we call the bowling alley. So the Dehinden photo, the aerial photo taken in 71 or 2,
right.
Probably 72, right? Would have been probably from that angle. I mean, I'm no expert about camera perspective, but judging from the shadows and the trees we find here and the position of the creek, I mean, it probably would have been on that hillside right there, which corresponds very well with what Titmus drew in his diagram of the filming area.
Just before, I guess, the USGS did the topo map on it, the river hit that bank on that far side and cut across and created this spot that we were looking at before when we discussed the Hinden's X, where the river cuts back in here. So this was all filled in as one giant gravel bar Because we talked about this other one looking a little smaller than we thought it should be.
Well, it would have been bigger because there had been a lot more sand here.
So let's say this was all filled in. Does that make sense if this was all filled in here?
At a higher level.
At a higher level. And this is all one great big gravel bar. And then the river, before the USGS did their topo map, created that little spot, because we could find this on the USGS. This is the spot. But what if before that was one great big gravel bar?
You do see in the 72 photo or 71 photo, the aerial shot, that there's more of a curve in the front end of the sand. The creek curves out like that, but now you can see this gravel bar actually, it's winding this way more.
Curving back in towards us.
So it may have flowed down through there more like Gimlin.
Well, I mean, yeah, you can see. I mean, there's still
there's a
standing
second
water
creek
on
right
that.
there.
There's still a channel over there too.
Right.
Question is that the original one, and this the current one, or is that the one that's going to replace this one in decades or years?
It seems like it's moving this way.
It is because
it's
the
eroding
water.
and this is collapsing.
It is because the water is hitting that one spot way down over here, bouncing off on a straight angled line and coming and hitting this point right here, and that's why it's being eaten out.
Yeah, and this goes up to the hillside, really. So out here, it's just eating at the flood deposited sandbar stuff. Back in there, it's going to have to start going uphill.
Oh, I hear you. It can only go so far,
So
right?
it's going to come this way.
Correct.
Towards the softer, more malleable stuff. And then it hits some kind of crook there where that crook seems to have existed in 67 when they shot the film. I mean, there's still a log jam there today, but of course not exactly the same in appearance. Just the elements from the film, not from stories told about the film.
Right.
Analyzing the optical perspective of the cameraman and the creature and the surrounding objects. And you can see that there are berms of gravel piled up. The creek is eaten down into the gravel, but it's not as far down as it is. And there still remain big piles of that stuff, like would have been right down here. So when you in the first few frames, you see the creek, and then it disappears behind what looks like a rocky berm. But you know, you're getting mashed, compressed perspective at that point. So Patterson runs over that down into the creek bed, which could have been right here. He could have run right up here. The creature retreating over this way a little bit. So the first sighting, if it happened right there, would correspond pretty well with what we see on the ground right now. Yeah, down there, just downstream from where Gimlin is identified, is that down tree that could be an old tree from the 64 flood, knocked over.
True.
And the distances aren't so great, you know, that could not have been the first sighting spot as well.
Right.
But it does kind of correspond, what we see on the ground now, with what Bill Munn's been showing, with Patterson running up along the creek for a ways and then crossing over the creek when he's filming. You know, in the old days we thought they were standing right up next to the creek and he ran across it right away.
Yeah.
And we even thought that creek that we see was like a pool or something. So we assumed he was already on or over the creek, you know, filming over it. But
yeah, so Munns was saying that the creek kind of did a little S-turn there.
yeah, well, it replicates this really well. It comes up north, cuts out a crook and bends over towards the east. And then he runs out of film data, so you can't depict the bowling alley there. But we can see that the trees over there seem to replicate that Gimlin photo, the black and white one, where, like Ian has remarked in the past about the sloping hillside and the light coming through. Well, that might be the fact that the creek runs through there.
Well, let's go behind me and we'll take a look at that edge.